the U.S. would go hat in hand to China and Russia, trying to say, help, we need to get this to an end. Trump likes to pretend he's the big tough guy, and he's going to be exposed as being quite weak and having stupidly started a war that he couldn't finish. Iran wasn't threatening the United States. The United States did this for one reason and one reason only, to placate Israel. We manufacture between 600 and 800 Patriot missiles a year. Wow. When you realize that you're going to fire at least 2 per attack, and Iran on Saturday fired 140 missiles, do the math. That's 280 Patriot missiles. Wow. So right there, you're at 35% of annual production in just one day gone?
Jeez.
And so if this continues over 3 weeks at that same level, the United States supply of air defense missiles is going to be depleted, as is Israel's. And then at that point, Iran's going to be able to fire at will at the different targets in Israel and what remains of U.S. military targets in the Gulf states.
To you a clip that I saw yesterday that just kind of shows you a little bit of the incompetence that we're seeing from the White House. Take a listen.
He said there is a plan. He points to Venezuela as a template, which means to me that going in, they had some sense on the ground of what was coming next.
Okay, I can give you breaking news on the Venezuela thing.
Yeah.
I know who brought this together.
Okay.
An old friend of mine. How did they do it? Remember there was a $50 million reward on the head of Maduro?
Correct.
So informants connected with DEA, one of whom was the chauffeur for Maduro, 2 others who were in his security detail. They were collaborating with the U.S. government, and they arranged by this entire operation. It was done to get the reward money. Wow. That's where this originated.
Wow.
And Trump, shame on him, has refused to pay the reward.
Oh gosh.
So you got all these guys that cooperated, and now they're getting stiffed.
Wow. That's breaking news there.
That story should come out. I know my friend is going to give it to Catherine Herridge, I think.
Okay.
And she may break it in the next week or 2. But that's how it happened. The information that Delta Force got came through my friend and these sources, these informants. Okay, so that's so this is one more example where Trump is lying, pretending that they did things in a certain way in Venezuela, which they didn't. It was entirely bought and paid for, except he never paid off. He's like a bad slot machine.
Jeez, that is crazy. Well, I appreciate you breaking that story. I mean, I haven't heard that story yet. So, I mean, hopefully they do break that news and it becomes, nationwide that all of America can understand that. But I think it speaks a lot, Larry, to just how incompetent the U.S. government is right now and the leaders that are making the decisions. Because if they think that Venezuela, it would be, or if they think that Iran is going to be exactly like Venezuela, just this walk in the park, we're going to capture Maduro and then off you go. And then obviously we've gone one step further. We've assassinated the Ayatollah, caused a significant amount of deaths, as you mentioned earlier, with those school children that were unfortunately lost their lives in a military strike. I mean, this has really enraged an entire nation. And like you said, you can understand why they chant these certain slogans against the United States. I mean, it's based on what our government has done to them. And it is just really, really unfortunate.
Yeah, no, it is. When you go back and reconstruct the history of the relations between the United States and Iran, again, we always tell it from the standpoint that we're the victim, that here we were minding our own business and they just attacked us out of nowhere. We blame Iran for the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut in April, May of 1983, followed by the October bombing of the Marine barracks, or the building in which they were housed in Beirut, killed 241 Marines. We ignore the fact that we had deployed battleships to the region, that those battleships were shelling Shia villages in the Baikal Valley and killing Shia men, women, and children, and that there were already existing political movements that had nothing to do with Iran. We frequently blamed Hezbollah for that attack in 1983, but it wasn't Hezbollah. Alistair Crook was on the ground then, a British intelligence officer, but described as a British diplomat, but he was British intelligence. Yeah. He said the ones that carried it out was this group called Amal, AMAL. Well, okay. Amal was created, organized in 1972. 7 years before Iran even existed. So this was a Shia movement that predated Iran, and they're the ones that carried out the attack, killed Marines. But why did they kill the Marines? Because we were there killing them. You know what? So, let's put that out of the way. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we started the war. We helped Saddam Hussein start the war against Iran by Iraq. They killed, hundreds of thousands of Iranians. When we went into Iraq in 2003, we discovered this group called the Mujahideen al-Khalq, MEK, and they were they were described as Marxist Islamists. Now, I don't even know how that, that's like talking about a transgender dog or something. But they immediately got put under the wing of the CIA. Mm-hmm. And even though they were listed on State Department's list as a foreign terrorist organization, because they had carried out frequent terrorist attacks against civilians for political purposes, they started receiving CIA support and protection. CIA then moved them to Albania and then used them to carry out attacks inside Iran. And in 2012, the Hillary Clinton, as Secretary of State, had them removed from the list as terrorists. They got to be, friends of the United States. And so we have this long habit of working with the radical Islamic Sunni terrorist groups. We just did it in Syria again with this guy al-Shara, who used to be known as al-Jilani, head of Hayat Tahrir al-Shem, had actually carried out terrorist attacks, chopping heads off of people because he was a devout Sunni. Wow. And it was Iran that was fighting in Syria against ISIS, against Al-Qaeda. Those are the ones that attacked us on 9/11. Here's Iran fighting against them, and we claim Iran as the enemy. I mean, it's so screwed up. It makes no sense. And yet the American public are continually being gaslit with this nonsense that Iran represents this major threat to us, when the reality is they should have been one of our best allies in the region, much more trustworthy than the Saudis and the Qataris and the Emiratis, who have been did fund the very terrorists that attacked us on 9/11. Right. You can't make this stuff up.
It's hard to really believe all of this, and just to see how gross the incompetence has been. Yeah. But again, this is why I really love having you on the show, because you bring in so many years of incredible insight and just a great knowledge of this. So, Larry, I have a question for you. I mean, if you were still advising the CIA and the U.S. military, which I wish you were, because I think we'd be in a much better position. But what would your strategy be right now for the future as far as where we are in this? Because I think, like we mentioned at the start of this, I think Donald Trump has found himself that he's opened a can of worms that he had no idea what was inside that can. And I think he is bitten off a lot more than he can chew. Where does the United States go from here? How do they actually, basically, end this threat? I mean, where's the exit ramp here is my question.
Well, and let me, in fairness to Donald Trump, this is not his plan. He's not driving the train. He's not Casey Jones. Okay. Instead of saying that he's driving that train high on cocaine, no, he's a passenger. This train, I'll call it the deep state train, and it's an alliance between senior bureaucrats in the intelligence community, in the military community, and then in the world of both finance and industry. And it's really sort of it is a large, relatively small group, because what I'd say is you step back and say, what is it we're trying to accomplish? Well, instead of assuming that all these countries are out to screw us out of something, to take us over, to conquer us, the fact is the matter, we're the ones doing that. So right now, as an example, one of the largest bases, CIA stations in the world in terms of per capita number of CIA personnel assigned to a country in terms of the country's population, is in Armenia. Why is it Armenia? Well, Armenia sits in the Caucasus. It is one of the oldest Christian communities in the world, but it sits there also between Russia on the north, Iran on the south. Right. And why is the CIA there? Running operations to destabilize Russia to the north, Iran to the south. So the CIA continues to have its objective is to secure control of the oil and gas in Iran, cause the breakup of Iran into smaller components, do the same to Russia, all with an eye ultimately to being able to corral and defeat China. That's the big plan. Now, Trump, he's just a play. He thinks he's in charge. And he's more like, I don't know, when you were a kid, did you ever sit on your dad's lap or mom's lap while they're driving a car and they let you pretend like you were driving? That's Donald Trump. Yeah. He gets to imagine like, hey, look at me, I'm driving the car. Right. Last year when he hosted Armenia and Azerbaijan for this great peace agreement, and he kept calling it Azerbaijan and Albania.
Right.
So he didn't even know who the hell he was meeting with.
Right.
Because
exactly.
Where did that meeting originate? That meeting originated with the CIA because of what the CIA is pursuing as part of its covert operations, covert actions. So that's where, going forward, we need to start by dismantling the CIA. We need to break it down, burn it to the ground, start all over. Wow. Because we need an organization that's not beholden to these outside interests, and his real purpose should have been produce information that the president absolutely needs to know in order to keep America safe. Not let's gin up information, let's fabricate information that will compel the president to act in a certain way that'll serve our let's call it these bureaucratic financial interests, without regard for what it does to America.
Right.
And that's where we've had endless war after endless war. Going back, there's a book up on my shelf by Tim Weiner, Legacy of Ashes. It tells really the history of the first 50 years of the CIA. And in that entire time, all we're doing is trying to subvert other countries. Instead of trying to say, how can we get along? How can we help them? How can we live together in a peaceful world?
That's very sad. And I mean, we know that famous clip from Michael Pompeo when he was the director of the CIA, who said, we lied, we cheated, we stole. That was basically the playbook that I learned, to become the director of the CIA. I'm so surprised that he would actually admit that on camera. But it is a viral clip that has been shown many times. And of course, that's countries. It's interesting because whenever, we talk about the U.S. government and the CIA and how the government works, they frequently bring up that clip and said, well, we kind of know, what's going on behind the scenes, because it's we never take what you say with truth, because you guys are lying, stealing, and cheating. And, you even admitted it when you were the director of the CIA. This is really crazy. Larry, I have one more question I want to ask you for today's podcast. And it really deals with, where the future of this is going and how long of a war that you think that this could be prolonged. I think that, very similar to Iraq, when, I think it was done when it was Dick Cheney, they asked him, how long do you think this is going to be? He said, I'm very confident in our troops. I think that we can get this done in, maybe weeks, not even months, maybe days. It might stretch to weeks, but we're going to be in and out. Of course, that turned into a disaster. We've seen Afghanistan that has, certainly 20 years of fighting on the ground. Yeah. I think the key thing here that I want all of our listeners to understand is that there has never been a successful regime change launched by the United States simply by dropping bombs. You alluded to that earlier, right? You can't just launch an air mission. What it does actually require is to have boots on the ground. I think the successful case study would probably be Germany back in 2000, back in World War II. But obviously, that was World War II. There was a significant amount of effort there. The troops on the ground, a huge loss of American life, obviously. But we have not had any success in the Middle East at all. So what do you think as far as the timeline of this and our efforts?
If Iran can continue to sustain the launch of the missiles over the next 3 weeks, they will deplete both Israeli and U.S. supplies. And if they continue to maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz and the shutdown of maritime traffic out of the Persian Gulf, the United States is going to be pleading for a deal. And I can't dismiss the possibility the U.S. would go hat in hand to China and Russia trying to say, help, we need to get this to an end. But that puts Iran in a potentially very powerful negotiating position. I think one thing that they would likely demand up front is you're going to lift all economic sanctions against Iran, number one.
Right.
I could see them also demanding that the Israelis abandon Gaza, get out of Gaza, allow the southern exit to be open to Egypt so that normal trade and commerce between Egypt and Palestinians can take place.
Right.
And they may very well be in a position to dictate those kinds of terms. I'm sure that they would also be willing to offer some concessions with respect to if they continue with the religious mandate to not build a nuclear weapon. What I can't rule out is the new Ayatollah who will be confirmed soon. If he comes in and says, we tried to live by God's law, and it has resulted in all of these martyrs being made. So we now need to, find a religious justification. We need to protect ourselves in order to protect people so that they can do the will of God, and Iran will quickly get a nuclear weapon. The very thing that we claim we wanted them to avoid doing, we will have triggered and made possible. Because, we killed the one guy who for 36 years has opposed building a nuclear weapon. It was Khamenei's religious edict that prevented Iran from building it. Now he's gone. And if his successor says, no, we're not going down that path, boom, genie's out of the bottle. So I think Trump is going to be faced with a stalemate, or let's call it a stalemate, because we don't have the troops to put it on the ground. We don't have the naval force to deploy, because if it gets too close to the shore, it's likely to get sunk.
Right.
And just today, Trump announced that he wants the Strait of Hormuz open, making big threats. And if not, we're going to send in our U.S. Navy to accompany those tankers. Boy,
that'd be suicide. That would be
sitting ducks. Iran will blow them up in a heartbeat, and without any regret.
They would probably be salivating at the opportunity to do that.
So Trump likes to pretend he's the big tough guy, and he's going to be exposed as being quite weak and having stupidly started a war that he couldn't finish. And Iran's going to make him, eat that one. You remember, it was. Do you think that the United States, according to reports over the weekend, after the war started, reached out to Italy to see if they could broker a ceasefire with Iran on the promise that we'd restart negotiations? Iran said no, and hell no.
Right.
But why do you think Donald Trump was doing that? I mean, if he's winning, as he says he is, we're winning, big victory. Why do you, if you're really defeating them, why take your foot off their throat?
Right.
This is like saying, hey, we're up 48-0 in this football game, and let's call a ceasefire, let's call a timeout, and just agree that we'll restart the game in some way so that you guys aren't behind 48-0. That doesn't happen.
Correct.
So, when I saw that, I went, it's worse than we thought.
Wow. Well, Larry, I want to just say thank you so much for these incredible insights, because a big part of our broadcast here on YouTube is trying to bring our viewers the stories that you're not going to find on the media, on the Western media. You're not going to find these insights, but this is why citizen journalism is becoming so important. And I want to say thank you so much. I know this was your first time appearance on the show, but we definitely look forward to welcoming you back and learning more from your incredible insights and knowledge of the U.S. military and the situation around the world.
Well, Cyrus, thank you so much. I appreciate the offer and glad that I didn't scare you off.
Oh, gosh. It's always a chance for me to learn as well. So I love these podcasts because it's a learning opportunity for our viewers, also for myself, as we try to, navigate this crazy world that we live in. So again, Thank you so much, Larry.
All right. Thank you.